Oh, oops. Just dropped my earphones. Go ahead. Carry on.
Here
What were you
we
saying?
are. Yes. What I was saying. It's a crazy world.
No, I was saying that.
You were saying that.
Crazy old world we live in, yeah. It is a bit crazy, you know. I think... Does everybody recognise that now? No?
Yeah, I think so.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Well, they do. Some of them do. But only spottily, you know. Certain issues that come on their radar. Very few people are keeping track of the whole thing, you know.
Right.
And
No,
putting...
that's rare. That's
How
rare.
many people are connecting the dots?
That's rare.
They're all in their little...
But crazy world syndrome is like everyone has a version of. What's astonishing is that most people have normalized it. They've just incorporated it into their. I can have a conversation with my parents, you know, and they talk about the world's going crazy, but they immediately offer the solutions that they've heard about
From the media.
So
it's only when...
And anyway, when's the next, you know, thing on, the show on, or the whatever? They've normalized, they incorporate it. They don't go, oh my God, the world's crazy. I wonder if there's something profound going on that
Something profoundly wrong.
profoundly wrong, or
Foundationally.
if it's heading all in a certain direction or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's rare.
Yeah. So when the media stops giving them narratives as to how to explain it away, that's when they'll start getting worried, right?
Right. That's when the fun starts. When, you know,
There's
the
no more
satellites don't
explanations.
work anymore.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, that's
Actually don't work.
well, the media infrastructure.
Yeah. When the
I'm thinking most of it's
the information stops flowing
yeah.
or stops giving answers to explain away the problems, what
Yeah.
this means,
to,
how we can fix
to explain
this.
away the stress,
Yeah.
because that's what helps them cope with the stressors
Hmm.
as they pile up. You know,
Mhm. That's why COVID was such a big, and the lockdowns was such a big issue for people, because nobody had any immediate solutions. Nobody had any explanation as to what's going on. I mean, nobody in the media and nobody in government, you know, so people were very disturbed by that. And also because it directly affected their lives, you know. So it's a combination of two things there. Most of these things that are happening in the world that amount to a crazy world don't directly affect people's lives yet.
yeah.
Most people in the West, anyway. And most people around the world, really. There's no direct impact on people's lives yet.
Right.
It's building up a head of steam to the point where will maybe at some point soon in the near future start to directly impact people's lives, and then they're going to look to the media and government for explanations. How what's going on and how do we fix this and how do you fix this? And the government will give answers and it won't fix anything. And then I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, so yes, crazy world. Tell us about the crazy world, Neil. What's crazy? Come on, you have to substantiate your argument that it's a crazy world. What happened this past week, basically?
Well, the assassination of Shinzo Abe
Yeah,
in Japan,
par for the course, no?
resignation of Boris Johnson.
Whatever. Who cares?
Glad
Glad to see the back of him. Bring on Liz Truss.
Another mass shooting in the US. July
Meh.
4th.
One more.
Uh,
See, it's not so crazy. It's normal.
That's what I mean. You see, everything that happens is normal in the sense that there isn't really a radical, with one exception. COVID was a radical break. And that actually did have normies going, okay, what? Why? You know? Now, in their fear, though, they also did nothing. So they, in a sense, my argument is still correct that they still normalized. They adapted to it remarkably well.
They
quickly.
shouldn't. They shouldn't.
They should not have. But
Yeah.
so
Well,
all these things are last week's news are normal, and yet
They're not. Depends
they're
how.
not.
Depends what yardstick you use for normal. Basically, if you use the,
If you're using 1990s, it's not normal.
if you're using last week as a reference point for whether this week has been normal, then yeah, it's been normal because last week was crazy too. But yeah, that mass shooting, another mass shooting. Yeah, again, I know it was Monday, so it's almost a week ago, and not a lot has been said though about it really, and which kind of backs up your point that it's been normalized, right? There's been a relatively muted response. I suppose the more those kind of shootings that happen, the more people are just going to go, no, they're just going to push. Yeah, that happened. That happens. That happens quite regularly. Big deal. It used to be a bigger deal, but over the past number of years, it's become normal. But on that point, so the thing that just jumped out for me at this stage, like I know there's been many similar mass shootings in the US, but what stood out for me in terms of the response, the public response to it, was whether or not he was a lefty or a righty.
Yeah.
People went to that inane kind of talking point immediately. So is he a Trumper or is he a Democrat, basically? You know, which is he? And that would then explain something. Was that going to explain it? But like, they forget the fact that, what is he, 22? 22 years old? I think he wasn't even 23, 22 years old. Or 21, yeah.
Yeah.
Kids at that age don't have strong political views.
Much less a strategy about how to capitalize on the political climate.
And if they do say they have strong political views, they'll change from one week to the next. So it's irrelevant what part of the political divide he thought he might have been on or whatever. It's obviously not not the topic that you need to be discussing, is to figure out what, if you want to try and figure out what caused it or why he did it. Forget about party politics, you know.
Right. But it was the first thing, and it was all over Twitter,
that was it.
Social media at first.
And then it turned out he was a bit of both.
It came from it was horrifying. So it still has a traumatic effect, even if it's much shorter lasting. Terror wears off over time, but still, each time it happens, it has a traumatizing effect. So in the first 24, 48 hours, the effect was to ameliorate the stress. Each side would go, "He was your guy," and the other one would say, "No, he was your guy." And you can see why it was confusing to both, because just look at him. You're thinking left, right, just by appearances.
Yeah.
But then his social media track record, which is a bit weird, because it had both things going on.
That's why
he attended Trump rallies for sure. He spotted there at them. He himself posted. He also welcomed. I couldn't figure out. They said that the video he posted was the presidential motorcade arriving in 2020, which would make, I guess that would be Trump then. And he's hollering there. He's there with his father. His father's right at the end of this short video, and they're whooping "USA, USA." So I'm guessing his daddy is a Republican, voted pro-Trump, and he was there with him.
Right.
So okay, the end of story. He's a Trumper. But no, in his most recent social media track record, he's liking President Biden's tweet, or whoever's tweeting on his behalf.
Which speaks to what I just said, that he's not. He doesn't have an opinion, basically, in that respect. He doesn't have any kind of opinion that's worth talking about. So there's some other reason why he did it, or why he was there, let's say. But just on that point, there's a couple of interesting news reports, and again, we've talked about mass shootings in the US a lot over the years, and there's always something strange or weird about, well, almost always there's something strange and anomalous about them. There's something also I want to bring up about the Uvalde shooting a couple of weeks ago that is in line with that, but we'll just look at this first one. This one is from, I don't know, some News Nation. What's News Nation? I don't know. Anyway, they speak to Eyewitness. Just play that. Maybe not all of it, but we'll get to the point that we want to discuss.
Go straight to Michael Schwartz, who is joining us right now. He's a witness who was there. Michael, what exactly happened? Can you explain it for us?
Well, first of all, my wife is confined to a wheelchair, and I was there along with my 2-week-old grandson, who was in a buggy. So we did not have the option of fleeing. We had to stay there, kind of laying on the ground. I had my wife as close to the ground as I could get her in the wheelchair. And the baby buggy, we had them both positioned behind something that was somewhat of a protection. But because of this, and partially because I couldn't believe that this was not fireworks, I stood up to see what was going on. And I've really got to, I know this is going to go against the grain of what people are saying, but I saw the shooter. I saw his gun. In between the rounds, I stood up because he was reloading, and I thought it was safe. And I saw him. He was a young kid, skinny, and he was in a military shooting position very close to the ground, the kind of position only a young, skinny kid could get into. And when he began shooting again, I hit the ground again. But I had a good look at this guy. He was not on a rooftop. He was on the street. He was right behind the street post that had a stop sign on it. and he was shooting from behind that. This information about being on a rooftop, just because there was an access to the rooftop, doesn't mean he was there. I mean, I saw this kid, and by the way, I saw when he got up and ran, when the gunfire stopped, I looked, and he got up and ran, and I saw him run north on 2nd Street. And at that point, I knew we were safe, and I was able to get my wife and our grandchild out of there safely.
Okay, just pause there, or you can stop it there. So that's basically, it seems like a reasonably coherent and lucid eyewitness testimony of this skinny little kid shooting on the ground, reloading. I think he goes on to say he reloaded once, fired about, he said about 30 shots for each time, twice. So 60 rounds, let's say, of a 30 bullet magazine or whatever. And then he walked off up the street. And so just go to this next one.
Her name's Gabriela Martinez, here because her niece was injured in trying to get away from the shooting, but thankfully not one of those 19 gunshot victims injured. We do want to toss to a shot from her so you can hear a first-hand account of a woman who was there and is now again here at North Shores Hospital in Highland Park. Take a listen.
I actually saw the shooter on top of Ross Cosmetics. He was in the roof on top of Ross Cosmetics, shooting towards the angle, not like towards the, I don't know if it's towards the parade or people, but like towards where we were. And we were all ducked down, and then I started screaming for my niece, my little nephew, her husband, my daughter. Then I think he was reloading. I don't even know. Like, as soon as when you're in that situation, like, you really don't know what to do because you start getting into a panic mode. And I got up, I grabbed my daughter. She slipped out of my hands twice, and I was getting really scared that she was gonna get shot. So I tried to cover her against my body so that if she got shot, I would get shot first. And then as soon as I was able to see Uncle Dan's, I pushed her in the store.
Okay.
Her name's Gabriela.
That's good enough. So you get two pretty clear, accounts. First one, very lucid, hiding behind a stop sign, saw the skinny little kid shooting, two reloaded once, then walked off. Guy was very clear, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And in this one, she was equally clear. And, Ross Cosmetics, knew the building, saw him on top of Ross Cosmetics, shooting at the crowd from that. But, so those two things can't be true. They're mutually exclusive, effectively, those two accounts. One person has to be completely wrong. Because the guy walked off, according to police reports and stuff, there was only 60 shots fired, and that fits with the first guy's account.
Well, they've upgraded that now to say over 70 shots.
Right, over 70. What's that, 72?
All the videos that capture the entire duration, you can count them yourself. It's 60.
Yeah.
60 audible rounds.
Right, for sure. So, but then adding on more shots could be, actually
from a suppressed weapon.
Well, it adds to the questions around the story. There's another short video. We'll just watch it and then we can discuss a bit more. Just throw that one up, Scotty. Go ahead.
Thus, further the investigation and aid investigators. One point I just want to clarify is Robert Crimo III. He's 21. He'll be 22 in September of this year, and he's a resident of Highwood. So throughout the past 24 hours, investigators have spoken with numerous witnesses, some of the survivors. They've had the opportunity to review numerous video clips, both from cell phone video recordings and fixed cameras in the area, and they've conducted a number of other follow-up investigations. And based on where we're at this point in the investigation, and some of this is still preliminary, so is subject to change as we keep moving forward, but we do believe Crimo pre-planned this attack for several weeks. He brought a high-powered rifle to this parade. He accessed the roof of a business via a fire escape ladder and began opening fire on the innocent Independence Day celebration goers. The rifle was purchased in Illinois, and the information we have thus far is that it appears to have been purchased legally by Crimo. During the attack, Crimo was dressed in women's clothing, and investigators do believe he did this to conceal his facial tattoos and his identity and help him during the escape with the other people who were fleeing the chaos. During the attack, we believe that Crimo fired more than 70 rounds from this rifle into the crowd of innocent people. Following the attack, Cremo exited the roof. He dropped his rifle and he blended in with the crowd and he escaped. He
All right,
walked.
he walked whatever north.
He walked to his mother's house,
Right.
got the car. She did no idea what had just happened.
Yeah.
Borrowed her car and drove off to Wisconsin for 8 hours. On his way back into Illinois, he was stopped in a routine traffic stop.
Right.
Yeah, that's so. By the time he got home, obviously he didn't appear like a woman to his mother because she didn't ask any questions.
Right. So somebody dressed up as a woman, or even more than one person dressed up as a woman, it's a very good. A man obviously dressed up as a woman and shooting. It's a good cover, right? It's a good,
It's very good, especially if you don't intend to ever get caught.
right.
But
So
Cremo was caught
right,
as Cremo,
So-
not as a woman.
right. And he bought. You were mentioning earlier that he bought these guns. Give a little rundown of his background.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, first of all, Highland Park County was the first county in the United States in 2013 to ban assault rifles. It was challenged on Second Amendment claims, counterclaims, like you can't just do that. They succeeded in court and the ban was upheld. You cannot have, own, possess, whatever, buy these weapons in this county. Now, the 4 weapons in question, or 5, whatever he owned in the end, were purchased just across the way somewhere else. Okay, so that's how he did it. But he should not have got the weapons by all the laws in the books that it currently exists. You know, they're like gun control. We need more gun control. There are plenty of gun control laws in the books, not least the fact that in 2019, here, let's pull up the CNN article actually, and we'll follow there right up off it. Police were at his house twice in 2019, just before he started buying weapons. Over domestic disturbance, it's unclear who called because by the time the police got there, both parents said it's fine, nothing's wrong. I suspect it's his sister because she's redacted. A 28-year-old woman is redacted from the final reports, which they have published. So if you scroll down to begin with, Cremo had 2 encounters. I think it's carry on down somewhere in the midsection. Keep going. Keep going. Here we go. Gunman had prior contact with police. Cremo had 2 encounters with police in 2019 over fears for his safety and that of others. The Highland Park, so local police, Highland Park Police Department received a report in April 2019 that Cremo had earlier attempted suicide. That's the first one. In September that year, a relative, unnamed, redacted, probably a sister, reported that Cremo threatened family members to, quote, kill everyone, and had a collection of knives. Police removed 16 knives, a dagger and a sword, a samurai sword, from their home. Highland Park, again local police, submitted a, quote, clear and present danger report about the visit to the Illinois State Police. So that's passing it up the chain to state level. Family members were not willing to file additional complaints. Yeah, so in filling up the backstory of this, the police explained that the parents did not want this to become a case. They did not want this to go on his record. You know, they started to protect him, whatever, despite cops being called out over, risk of violence. Over the next 2 years, Cremo, actually beginning in December, I don't know if that's explained here, but 3 months after this second police call out, over the next 2 years, Cremo legally purchased 5 guns.
Rifles, pistols, possibly a shotgun. And the state police can confirm Tuesday that Cremo passed 4 background checks.
4 background checks between June and September 2021.
Which included checks of the Federal National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Doesn't work very well, does it?
No, it doesn't. You see, this report that was filed by the local cops was sent up to state level. It should have triggered his background check, and he should have been denied at the point of sale at this gun store in just across county lines in the neighboring county. So the gun clerk, the owner of the store would have immediately had it on his system, I'm not selling you the weapon. It didn't. Why the hell not? Well, Illinois State Police published an update Wednesday, 3 days ago, claiming that
just before you go to that, to buy guns in the paragraph there, to buy guns in Illinois, people need a firearm owner's identification card. Cremo was under 21, so he was sponsored by his father.
That's right. I know, nuts. So it's legal. That is a way around not having the proper ID for it. That's one aspect
But
where the trigger that normally would have been kicked in
like underage
didn't, because his father. I mean, imagine that is ridiculous on the face of it. That if you're under 21, your parent can sponsor you, sworn affidavit, blah, 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 blah. But what's the point in having the law and saying, no, the cutoff point for weapons is 21?
Right.
If there's a workaround.
Right.
Okay, but whatever.
But that's nothing to do with the background checks, really.
No, separately, it didn't matter what his father did or didn't do.
He still shouldn't have been able to get a gun.
He should not. The 4 background checks were not triggered as to the quote, it's a functional document. It's a working document they've had for 10 years at least in the state of Illinois. In fact, since the 1990s. It's been super advanced in terms of triggering red law flags about who can get weapons. Why wasn't it triggered? The clear and present danger report should have. Well, there's just been a quiet update to that by the Illinois State Police, presumably after people started talking about this. Published Wednesday, sorry, that's actually 4 days ago. It's just a 1-page press release, and the only clarification on that matter as to why the quote clear and present danger report did not trigger is at, oh gosh, can we blow it up? Probably not. Anyway, they only mention at the very end of it.
Yeah, scroll down to the bottom.
I think it's in the last paragraph.
Illinois law.
The text I'm looking for is upon review. There it is. It's the last sentence of this paragraph. Upon review of the report at that time, the clear and present danger report attached to this individual, the reviewing officer, presumably at the Illinois State Police level, concluded there was insufficient information for a clear and present determination. And so it was not on his file. As far as local police was concerned, there was justification. And so they wanted it filed with the state. And if someone at state said, nah, within weeks, he begins buying firearms.
Yeah, that could be ideology. That could be like a pro-gun.
I know. It could
be
who
knows? Or it could be something that was part of a plan. Because whether people like to admit it or not, there's a lot of evidence that these kind of shootings, the shooters in these kind of shootings have had help, have had inside help, etc., and that a lot of the shootings have been to one extent or another orchestrated by forces unseen, unknown. I just want to go back to Uvalde, and it kind of speaks to what I just said. This is the Uvalde shooting in Texas from a couple of weeks ago, and this is the mayor of Uvalde. You can just play that, and I'll stop you at the relevant point.
Mon inspiration vient des relations. C'est pour ça qu'on a créé ce café associatif. C'est un lieu de rencontre.
Why? Yeah, Frenchies.
The cover up on DP,
they're covering up.
McGraw's covering up
for who?
For maybe his agencies, or maybe he told the story he told that it's hard. What do they say? It's always hard when you tell a lie. You have to keep telling a lie. I'm not saying he's lying. Maybe he was misled with the information.
But he hasn't changed his story, right?
No,
since
but
that
also,
Friday, he did, and then he did the Senate hearing, and I think that
which was
even more. He was even more emphatic about Chief Arredondo being the man who was responsible for everything here, blaming everything on him.
Well, again, every agency in that hallway is going to have to share the blame. And like I said, again, I'll go back to, when have you ever seen a federal or state law enforcement officer take their cues from local law enforcement?
Okay,
DPS is a big agency.
That's really the only point that I wanted to talk about. So he just said, when have you ever seen federal or state police take their cues from local police? So he's talking about cover-up, somebody covering up, and he mentions McCraw, which is the Texas Department of Public Safety Director, which is a federal post. So he's pushing it up the line basically, and what he's saying is that it's not that this guy McCraw, if he's part of a cover-up, he's putting the blame back on local law enforcement and stuff, that they didn't do what was necessary to stop the shooting in Uvalde. But as the mayor there rightfully says, when have you ever seen local law enforcement take their orders from higher up the chain of command, basically, which would be state or federal police officers? And they were both involved, and by federal, effectively in this case, you're meaning the FBI. So the FBI were involved here. So he's basically saying that either the state at either the state or the federal level, i.e. the FBI level, orders were given to do something. We still don't know, and maybe we'll never know, because there's a lot of secrecy around the Uvalde shooting. There's a lot of recriminations and finger pointing and stuff, but there's obviously the problem in that case, in that shooting, was that police didn't do what they should have done. Who told them to not do what they should have done? That's what's being covered up effectively.
Yeah, I smelled a rat when it had been all quiet for a couple of days on Uvalde, and then breaking news, international. Basically, local police were hung out to dry. Yeah. That's what I think. Yeah. That's someone has jumped the gun there, like to go straight out and hang out the local cops. Right. When we know there were federal people who responded as well. Right. And handing down orders. Again, the FBI puts me in mind of the Las Vegas shooting, and the really, if people remember, the really creepy. I can't remember his name now, but remember that creepy FBI regional director, maybe. It was standing in the background all the time in Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas, yeah. When he was shooting, when they were giving press conferences about the shooting and stuff. Yeah, and I think I mentioned this last week about the FBI. The FBI's bread and butter is terror plots, right? It's effectively organizing individuals, vulnerable, susceptible, manipulatable individuals, to place them in a position where they can be arrested and accused of planning or plotting to carry out terror attacks or some kind of attack against America. That's what the FBI has done for a long time. That's the main, a major part of their activities.
Well, we know that Uvalde Ramos, that 18-year-old, was talking to someone who was, quote, a retired FBI agent. Yeah. In internet chat rooms in the weeks leading up to it.
For me, it's very easy. I mean, it's in the media. It's in the mainstream media, right? I mean, there's maybe we'll put a link in the notes for the show, but there's been several mainstream media investigations and reports into FBI terror plots going back over 10 or 15 years. That say explicitly that the FBI was effectively behind 90+% or most of those terror plots. The FBI themselves created them out of whole cloth, brought them almost to fruition, and then arrested the so-called or would-be perpetrators and claimed that this was a great success for the FBI in foiling a terror plot. I mean, that's a matter of public record at this point. It's accepted by the mainstream media even. So if that's accepted, and you can see, and there's lots of evidence for it, because they're not just spitballing, they're actually providing evidence from not so much from the FBI, but primarily from informants who were involved in these essentially phony terror plots created by the FBI. If that's a matter of record, why can't that be transferred to very similar situations, which was as the terror plots, which is mass shootings? They're in essence the same, right? Mm-hmm. They're an assault, a violent assault with a significant number of deaths on the public, basically. Yeah. So there's not much to choose between those two, as far as I'm concerned. And when I see the FBI involved in mass shootings in some way or other, particularly in the response, and possibly being involved in suppressing the response of local law enforcement, well then I'm like, it's not a stretch, for me anyway. So not much more to say about that, I suppose. Just leave it hanging there.
Well, that's why that's all you can do. That's why they're arguably the more effective. They're creepier. than the previous iteration of Islamist terror attacks. Islamist terror attacks, at least there was like, it was vague and it was nebulous and it could always be easily picked apart. But there was a reasonably plausible enemy that people could hang their hat on and direct their anger at. It was foreign. It was usually Muslim, and there's some vague political motive to it. Well, we want to get the Americans out of the Holy Land or something like that. That was Osama bin Laden's first political explanation for it. They gradually got crappier and crappier as you got to ISIS, but at least there was something vaguely political about it. Now there's nothing. People are left to fight as to whether he's your side or my side, and that's it. They're bleached of all politics. It's apolitical. And people are like, what do I...
Well, it's never apolitical.
What do
at
I
this
blame?
But it's not apolitical because at the basis is the pro-anti-gun debate, right? And that's what really the recent shootings really have been stoking within America. And it's interesting to see that evolution of it from the beginning. And like you said, like you rightfully said, it went from terror plots or terror attacks in America, domestic, went from Muslim of some description to white nationalism or something, or just domestic, just not
right. If
no longer Muslim.
If there is a political narrative attached to it, it's that one.
Right. There haven't been really any radical lefty gun attacks, have there? That for that specific purpose, like for
not narrative-wise, although there've been some with links to
possible links, but
lefty,
most of it has been on the right wing.
Yeah.
White, supposedly white supremacist, etc.
Pro-Trump,
very young people, etc. So it's interesting to see that how that has evolved from being a thing that was obviously it always focused on, it caused chaos or dissent or problems within in American society, but it went from the rationale for the shootings being an external factor, like get out of Palestine, get out of Syria, get out of Iraq, whatever, to now it's just, well, it's internal. It's an American-made problem, and it's internal to America.
It's unspoken, but what it is don't you dare vote for Trump again. Yeah. Don't you dare. Or we'll do more of this.
Maybe.
And you don't know where we'll get you.
Yeah.
That's the unspoken threat here.
Yeah, but they were there before.
So it's supercharged politics, actually. It has the appearance of being apolitical.
But I don't imagine even if Trump...
high politics.
Yeah, I don't imagine if Trump is never elected again that they'll stop.
No.
I think at this point they're fairly sure that Trump won't be elected again, but they continue. So there's an agenda there, if assuming coming at it from it being an organised, deliberately kind of...
Then to broaden it out, it's like, don't you dare go against us.
Yeah, or...
in any way.
Or not even a message, just to sow chaos within society. Sow chaos within, and sow division within American society. Keep people at each other's throats, divided, scared. Because, on a very basic level, that always serves government and the political elite, is when the people are fighting amongst themselves rather than fighting looking towards the people in positions of power as the problem, essentially. So yeah, shootings seem to be on the rise. There's a couple actually just recently in South Africa. Again, it's strange to see 18 people killed in South Africa in 2 bars. Barely makes the news, It's a footnote in a lot of the news. Gunmen going in. Of course,
heard that.
That's just, to do with drugs, alcohol, kind of, trafficking type thing going in, evening scores or something, almost like the Mexican stuff, There's so many shootings going on in Mexico on a regular basis, and it's just taken as it's normalized, right? Especially in the West, it's normalized. Of course, it's not normalized in those countries, right? Especially in the local communities or in South Africa right now. There's a lot of people who are pretty freaked out about, gunmen shooting up bars full of effectively young people between 19 and 30 or 35. I think the 18 victims were.
Was there a black-white element where the shooter was one and the victims were the other?
Don't think so. No. I think because the majority of people...
Because that would be an easy thing to exploit in South Africa.
Yeah, there's no mention of that, and I don't think it was. I think it was primarily black South Africans who were killed. It's kind of par for the course.
On the eve of the July 4th shooting, there was a mass shooting in Copenhagen, Denmark. Never happens, or rarely happens. The last time was something similar, was 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Although that was unique. It was different as well. The last week's one in Denmark was like 22-year-old, same age, just did it cause. Was he shot dead or caught? Can't remember. Victims Danish. They were initially running with. They were like, you could see where they wanted to go. Oh boy, some white Dane is gonna kill some Muslims. Oh, he didn't actually. They were two Danes and a Russian. So then it just dropped.
Yeah. And then the other one, obviously, this week was Shinzo Abe. Pretty unfortunate end to his.
Yeah.
I think he was over 80, wasn't he? Was he over 80?
No, 67.
Really?
Yeah, he was young. He only quit as prime minister because he was sick with cancer. Maybe the only thing I can hold out that for any kind of a conspiracy potential of a higher political motive was that he might have been getting well again and thinking about coming back.
Right.
But I'm totally spitballing here because there's no mention of that anyway.
No, and why would anybody want to
So absent that,
him?
there's nothing. I don't see any political reason for.
Well, the only other political,
except that he was killed by a nutter.
Well, the main thing was that the only political thing that stands out is that today they're having parliamentary elections in Japan.
Okay.
To determine the number of seats for different parties in Japan.
For the upper house, which is apparently it's like their
Senate.
No, not even. It's more like the House of Lords. It's like unimportant.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why he was giving a speech. He was campaigning on behalf of someone else. He wasn't running himself.
Right. So how much do we... It's hard to tease it out, but I mean, the profile of the guy who shot him seems to be a similar kind of slightly, not very well balanced individual, and with a history of claiming that he was going to shoot people or shoot Shinzo Abe and Abe and. So how do we?
Police interviewing him said he's compos mentis. He's sane.
Yeah.
41 years old, had been in the Navy for 3 years back in the 2000s. Tetsuya Yamagami told investigators he had plotted to kill Abe because he believed rumors about the former leader's connection to a certain organization that police did not identify. Local media, citing police sources, said the killer Yamagami told police he believed Abe was linked to a religious group the shooter blamed for ruining his mother financially and breaking up the family.
Right.
Is that a personal grievance there?
It could well be. Child? It could well be, but it's contrast the two shootings. The shooting of the former Japanese Prime Minister was effectively recorded on camera. There's the shooting is actually can be seen effectively. Him being arrested. The gun he used was homemade kind of.
Have you seen a photo of it?
Yeah, gun.
Can we put it up?
Yeah.
It's just like, what the hell is that?
Yeah. But if you contrast the two, the confusion or the contradictions around the July 4th shooting in the US in Chicago and this one's kind of like pretty open and closed. It's like he's just a crazy guy.
Yeah.
You'd be excused for saying, well, there's the same in Chicago. He was just a crazy guy who just shot people, right? But you have to put it in context. You have to put the shooting in Chicago in the context of a long history of mass shootings, and like we were talking about, of there possibly being some involvement of other people.
Can we see that photo? Yeah. That's like it's a piece of wood, 2 barrels, black tape.
And
what the hell?
Some kind of electrical.
Joe Biden, he totally wrecked it, but he tried to link this tragedy with the issue of gun control in the US. He says, Japan now has won. I don't even know what he said. I don't even know what he was trying to say. He totally mumbled and fumbled it.
It's often
but
the case
I think
for Joe
he
Biden.
was trying to highlight the lack of gun deaths in Japan generally compared to the US. And you see, we could have a country like that. But he was speaking at the news of the death of Shinzo Abe. He was totally fluffing it because that doesn't give Japan any succor whatsoever.
Yeah.
The fact that you can't even have guns, you have to make your own. And it totally goes against his point. What this proves is the NRA's argument. Guns don't kill people.
Right, people.
People
And they'll find
kill
a way.
people. And if they want to, they'll find a way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Biden is foobar.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, what else has been going on? Russia's been getting a bit
Revolution everywhere.
obstreperous. Oh, revolution. Okay, revolution in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Revolution. Is
Well,
it revolution?
this flared up earlier a few months ago, but I don't know.
It's been
went
going on for
quiet.
longer than that.
Has it been going on continuously? And all? Remember, we showed some amazing videos in March or something. I've got one here of the size of the crowd this week. I thought they'd already done this. The news this week was that protesters stormed the President's Palace. Maybe it's just for the second time. And now there's photos of them like all jumping in the pool and hanging out in his bedroom and everything. So that's the President's Palace near Colombo in Sri Lanka.
At the beach.
Right
on the beach. Huh?
Size of that group. That's the palace there.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, the same as other places. It's cost of living. It's just like people are like, we're starving here. Can you stop, please, with your green agenda? And governments go, yeah, sure, we'll stop. And then they bring in a new government and they just start doing the same thing. Green, green, green. You published a list this week of countries with major protests. Did you get that somewhere else, or did you kind of follow and come up with it
I saw it
yourself?
somewhere, yeah.
Okay. I counted, it was 25. And it reminded me that the last time I've seen maybe this kind of level scale of protests around the world was just before COVID-19 pandemic. Back then, about a quarter of the world's countries had major mass protests. And the thing that was linking them was either green agenda stuff or neoliberal economic drives that were causing austerity.
And COVID put a stop to that.
Tightening the belt, people.
Yeah. So COVID was just an interlude in that.
Yeah.
And it's just, it didn't make it
It
go
caused
away.
an artificial dip, but now we're back on the same upward curve.
Right. Well, just an example of the kind of the egregious bullshit that comes out of the US government and how they just can't stop blaming Russia for everything. The Sri Lanka, those images you saw in Sri Lanka and the events in Sri Lanka of recent have been blamed, of course, by Blinken, the US government, effectively on guess who?
Putin.
Yeah.
Headline, Blinken sees Russia food blockage as factor in Sri Lanka turmoil.
Yeah.
Blinken would because Blinken's blinking blind.
Yeah. And this is despite the fact that a cursory look at Wikipedia, for example, if you just throw it up, you don't have to read very far, but it's a 2019 to present Sri Lankan economic crisis. Started in 2019.
Pre-COVID.
And if you just actually go down to the next section there on background, according to former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the country was a long way into an economic crisis in 2015. But ignore that, Russia did it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, these people have no shame, like in terms of Russia's to blame for everything. And apparently, I don't think anybody believes them anymore, but they keep saying it.
Except their buddies at the G7.
Right. So we're talking to each other, basically. But that economic crisis, it wasn't so much I don't know if it was a greening of the economy or whatever. It was just mismanagement of the economy and mismanagement of agriculture. Like a few years ago, they decided they were going to turn the entire agricultural production in Sri Lanka turn it organic, basically. So they stopped importing fertilizers and pesticides and all that kind of stuff because we're going to go organic, right? And it didn't work, right? They tried to do it figuratively overnight, and it was just a disaster. You can't retool a system like that in a very short period of time without causing serious problems. So I think it was in the case of Sri Lanka, it really is just a matter of fecklessness and probably a lot of corruption involved in it too. There were probably deals going on behind the scenes that were that were part of this going organic.
Yeah.
But
Could be bribes.
Yeah. So it's more of a corruption, mismanagement, and just, thing in Sri Lanka. But of course, it happens at a time when things in general, economically, in the world aren't in the best condition, aren't in the best state. So, but specifically, you notice it's only really in Sri Lanka. I know I posted a list of countries, a long list of countries, but people complaining, but none of the rest of them are to the extent that you're seeing in Sri Lanka, where they're actually, where the president has, left the country basically, and they're swimming in his swimming pool in his presidential palace. It's not that. It hasn't gone that far in other countries. There's protests, etc.
Well, the Netherlands.
Netherlands, yes. Again, that's farmers.
Rutte doesn't have a swimming pool because he lives with the plebs in the city. But
he'll be in the bunker soon. Maybe no, but
what's going on there? Like, the media's so quiet about it.
Well, again, it's a green. It's the government expropriating or expropriating farmers' land, shutting down farmland basically for in this case for a green agenda, and that's why I say it's different from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, I don't see it as the kind of Western neoliberal greening of the economy agenda. There it was something just stupidity basically. You know what I mean? But in Holland, yeah, for sure, it's them trying to meet their
here. That's also stupidity.
It is stupidity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not specifically the meeting of carbon emissions, etc. Carbon emission levels by Western governments. They're the ones who are fully on that. That's not really a thing in the rest of the world. You may have noticed. It's not outside of the international community, i.e., America, North America, and Western Europe. The greening of the economy and turning the economy into a sustainable economy to limit carbon emissions and stuff isn't something that has been taken up by most of the rest of the world. So the Holland thing is very much in that ballpark. And yeah, it's causing farmers to get quite irate and to protest. And it's interesting that it's only in Holland, that this is happening. Maybe it's because Holland is a small country. It has more immediate impact whenever you do that. It's probably specific. You're going to see stuff like that happening probably in smaller countries as they try to push this green agenda on smaller countries. The effect is going to be felt much more quickly than in bigger countries.
Yeah. It's a small country, but it's incredible. That tiny country, especially packed with people as it is Europe's largest exporter of meat. Cattle, and this would be why they were, because they were seeking to affect a 30% drop in nitrogen usage, I think, which farmers just did the math and went, "You're talking about closing a third of our farms." That's what that effectively. That's what would be required here. No, so
putting us out of work, basically.
Yeah,
making us redundant. Yeah, so. But there's similar agendas, talk of similar agendas in Ireland, for example. There's talk of doing exactly the same thing. Yeah. And of course, it's interesting that they're cutting, the agenda seems to be primarily focused on cutting cattle farming, like reducing cattle farming in these countries, i.e. reducing the meat supply. That's the end result, is reducing the meat supply by a significant amount, because everybody's going to eat insects anyway, or going to eat grass, or going to eat vegetables and insects, so you don't need meat anyway.
It's a chicken and egg question. Why, if they're so obsessed with the shortage, there isn't enough meat for everyone to eat, why are they actually bringing about the situation where there isn't enough meat for everyone to eat? Why run to the problem? Why create the problem to highlight the fact that there is a problem?
Well, I mean,
and thereby cause massive social unrest.
It's like if you're under the impression that there's a storm coming in that respect, and I mean, I know it's a big, has been for a long time, a big conspiracy theory, the idea of depopulation, right? But it's not so much depopulation as something that's more mainstream and more accepted mainstream, and is part of the whole green agenda, is that the planet is overpopulated, and it's the carrying capacity of the planet has been, for carrying the number of people on the planet we're past that point. Basically, it's no longer sustainable. That's why you keep talking about sustainability. It's no longer sustainable.
Do you
for
think
all
it's
the people on the
objectively
planet.
true, or have these people
Well,
taught themselves into that being true over the last 30 years?
Either, I don't know, either or. But I would say, like, for a lot of them, maybe they've bought onto it, and they have, and maybe it's true. Is it true? How do you get metrics for that? I don't know. How do you model that? Maybe we need you guy, what do you call him, Ferguson, who did the modeling for COVID. We need him to do a modeling for the population, the carrying capacity of the population, and whether we've passed it a long time ago already. But if they have their models and they say that that's the case, and they've bought on, they've signed on to that belief or that agenda that the planet is overpopulated, and that this is going to cause serious problems when you have, obviously, you're not going to be able to feed everybody and provide water for everybody, and there's going to be mass chaos, and it'll hit a point where it'll just spill over borders, and it'll just be a disaster. Well, then what you need to do is you need to manage that. Rather than just wait for it to happen, you manage the downfall, effectively, or the radical overhauling of global society, and in the case of, we're talking here in the West, Western society, manage the radical restructuring of Western society to make it easier, I suppose, to make it easier on yourself.
So this is what's going on now, is them making it easier on themselves.
Yeah, it's like you're all going to starve anyway, so we're going to starve you first. No, we're not going to starve you first, but we're going to, transition you to vegetable and insect diet. And I know it'll be difficult for you to accept that. There'll be a bit of kicking and screaming and stuff when we tell you that you're not getting your meat anymore, or you're going to have to drastically reduce it, but it's for your own good. And of course, we can't tell you all this, so we go ahead and do it, because you're not old enough to understand. You adults are not old enough to understand, because it would probably scare you if we were to tell you the truth of the situation. So we're going to present it in a kind of noble, altruistic framework of climate change, and because it's the same thing, you know what I mean? They talk about climate change and CO2 emissions and fossil fuels and stuff. That's all saying that the way the world is structured right now in terms of feeding the human population it doesn't work anymore. It's no longer working. And the way they craft the narrative there is to put the blame, in a certain sense, or at least the responsibility, on the people. So they give you a moral motivation to get behind their plans for restructuring society in a way that, the thing that I haven't mentioned is that it implies a reduction in the population, one way or the other. That the population has to be reduced. If we're holding the idea, and we assume they have this belief for this, their models tell them that there's too many people on the planet, you have to get rid of some. How many? Don't know, but some. Decent amount. Good few.
7.5 billion according to the Georgia Guidestones.
Georgia Guidestones was bullshit. That Georgia Guidestone stuff was just a bunch of kind of hippie type dudes in the 80s who were
Rosicrucians, no?
Whatever. Got scared about Got scared about the were a bit freaked out by the Cold War and the potential for nuclear Armageddon, and they decided to do this pet project where they made these Guidestones that were, in their little imaginations, were going to survive some possible potential future
catastrophe,
catastrophe, and would be there to guide humanity afterwards to, as a set of kind of new 10 commandments in a certain sense.
Right.
And one of them was keep the population below 500 million. Because that's good, right? They just decided that themselves, right? And there were other people. They're probably pulling from various different analyses of that were extant or were around at the time,
1980 they went up. So this is obviously after discussions in the 70s, and 60s.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
So it's occupied certain people's minds for a long time.
It did, yeah. And it's been occupying a lot of people's, exactly, for a long time.
And then, of course, people today have ascribed connecting agency with the people, either the specific people or group or mindset that put up the Georgia Guidestones with the Great Reset and all that's happening now. And they've gone,
let's blow them up.
Let's blow them up. This is probably an act of vandalism by someone who is pissed.
Anti-establishment, anti-system. But they're missing the point, really, It's That's the. I mean, we'll have to see as it plays out. But it seems right now, I think it's a reasonable explanation for why governments are doing what they're doing with this whole green agenda. A reasonable explanation is that they're under the belief, true or false, that there are too many people on the planet. It's not sustainable the way people are living, particularly in the Western world today, and that obviously it's not just the Western world, that has knock-on effects for the rest of the world and food supply and all that kind of stuff, and that's not sustainable, and it's coming to a head and will come to a head very quickly. And if we need to manage it, manage the changeover, the transition. Biden even said something recently about that. Despite I don't have the video, but he said something along the lines of that we're going through an interest or a profound transition right now away. Basically, he was saying away from fossil fuels. We're getting rid of fossil fuels and we're going to more sustainable, green forms of energy, and it's going to be difficult. And he was talking about the fuel prices. So it was a rare admission where he didn't blame Russia. That it was actually because, I mean, you know, part of his agenda, part of his electoral campaign was that he would do away with fossil fuels. That, I mean, there's plenty of videos of him saying that where we're going to specifically shut down fossil fuel production and move to. Again, there's kind of nested kind of narratives or understandings depending on where you are in the chain of command of how you understand these things. You know, you're given partial information or given more information about what's really going on and what the real problem is. But like I said, for me, a reasonable explanation as to why they're doing what they're doing, and it seems to be totally counterproductive. It seems to be deliberately creating, like you just said, creating the problem that they claim they want to fix. But so the only explanation is that they realize they can't fix that problem, right? That there is no solution to quote unquote climate change, or maybe more realistically overpopulation. So they have to manage the collapse, and try and manage it in as least chaotic a way as possible.
So this is the least chaotic option. What we're living through now.
But you can't do it.
It could be worse.
You can't do it because
it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. Saying. Well, maybe, I don't know. But if it implies, and I don't see any way around this with this theory, I don't see any way around the scenario where a lot of people have to die. Well, those people aren't going to go willingly, right?
Right.
If you're, how do you calmly manage the deaths of tens of millions of people or hundreds of millions of people and make sure they don't know about it? Not like, I don't know, gas chambers, maybe just going for a shower or something. You know,
final solutions aren't the best idea. It's best to have innocuous looking solutions that appear to seamlessly follow one after the other in a kind of
well, that's why you have all sorts of blaming as well. Blame Russia, blame China, blame whoever, blame everybody. And you need somebody to blame, like, because you're not going to be able to follow this process without people being very, very unhappy and you causing serious, you know, not that you're caught. Again, it's hard to tease it out. Are you causing it, or is it something? If you believe it's going to happen anyway, then are you causing it? No, I'm just trying to make sure, you know, happens in the best way possible.
Given that big picture theory, decipher this next one for me. The Bloomberg piece I just sent you, Scotty. Headline Bloomberg last week: Putin's war threatens Europe's ambitious climate goals.
Yeah, they're sort of burning more coal because they shut down, but they're using, of course, they created the war in Ukraine. They provoked Russia. They for the past 8 years, like we keep saying, for the past 8 years, they trained, armed, funded a strong, competent Ukrainian military with a view to earlier this year, invading Donbass and invading Crimea and possibly invading Russia. I mean, there's no more egregious or provocation against a country than threatening. They threatened war. They put all the pieces in place to actually wage a war against Russia. Russia responded. And then they like the opportunists they are, they take that as an opportunity to blame Russia for this managed transition that have been in the process of for the past number of years, it's a perfect scapegoat, right? It's someone to blame for it, right? But it exposes, that article exposes the lie, or the fact that the climate change and cutting carbon emissions is exactly that, a narrative. It's like I said, it's the narrative that you spread to the people in order to get them to go along with this restructuring of their lives, eating less meat, dying in large numbers, willfully, in order to save the planet or do your part. Of course, they're not telling them they're going to die in large numbers, but it's starting to shape up that way, you know what I mean? That there's going to be serious problems in terms of energy and food supply and all that kind of stuff, which implies that, you know, especially if you throw in another kind of a real virus this time, a real kind of plague kind of scenario or something, yeah.
So Putin's war, to use that term, at once gives them a useful foil for the managed transition they're implementing anyway. But the Bloomberg article was lamenting the fact that managed transition has been interrupted by Putin's war in real terms.
Yeah.
They seem confused, you know?
Yeah,
They're not sure, is it going right? Does this help?
Yeah, but the managed transition is only the narrative of the managed transition, right? Where we're going to go from away from coal and fossil fuels into green energy.
That's not actually going to happen.
They have no belief in that at all. No, they know that there's no way that you're going to fuel the planet, provide energy for the planet on the basis of wind turbines and solar panels. They know that. And I mean, there's plenty of analyses or modelling that has been done. You don't have to be very good at modelling to realise that that's not possible. Certainly not in the time frame that they claim it's possible. But they're going to push ahead with it anyway. And like people have said, and the sober people are looking at that situation and saying, I mean, are you guys crazy? You're going to destroy countries, economies, and endanger the lives of hundreds of millions of people if you try and push this through on the time frame that you claim you're going to push it through on. It's willful destruction. But what they can't say in response to that, what the elites, whatever, can't say in response to that is, no, listen, this is going to happen anyway. Things are really bad. The carrying capacity of the planet is past its sell-by date, basically. We can't do this anymore. There's going to be serious problems anyway. So we're selling, but it's all about it's a bad idea when you start bullshitting people, giving them a bullshit narrative as to why you're doing things, and then it starts to become obvious that that's not really what your agenda is. You don't seem to be following through, like that article just showed. Like they're just because Putin invades Ukraine, and it would have been probably done by now, it would have been over and done with. You would have had a new government in Ukraine, a new structure of Ukraine, whatever. Who cares? Do we think these people in Western countries really are that enthused about freedom and democracy and all the kind of the stuff that they come out with? You know, we're standing for global freedom. Ukraine, Zelensky is standing for global freedom and all that kind of stuff. It's nonsense. It's patent nonsense, you know. But yeah.
Article today in Germany in Bild, one of the big newspapers. This is a tweet about it, but I think it's probably a reasonable translation of the content. Bild writes, even now in the middle of summer, that the thought of approaching winter, this coming winter, causes horror among the mayors of German cities. So in one city, Ludwigshafen, they even plan to install common halls in which citizens who are unable to pay for heating in their homes will be able to warm up. And if you scroll down, it has a photo apparently of a school gym or something that's been 2 years ago. Maybe that was for COVID overflow, which may or may not have happened in that city. But here now it's just going to be, come in here if you want to stay warm. I mean, so that's what they're actually doing to ameliorate the actual physical situation for people. Because that's all they can do. Like last year, tea lights. Just heat your home with tea lights, you know. When it comes down to it, that is the actual capacity of what even a government has with the resources that German has.
The German government shut down Nord Stream 1 and didn't allow Nord Stream 2 to start, which would provide gas and obviously heating to these people that they're setting up these areas for. Why are they doing that? I mean, why are they preparing?
Ostensibly, it's to get Russia, but that doesn't make sense because they've got a 5-decade-long
what do you mean, get Russia?
To stop Russia funding the Russia war invasion of Ukraine. That's the ostensible
what's the problem?
Reason.
Why should tens of millions of Germans and other Europeans freeze this winter to stop Russia from taking a bit of Ukraine and sorting out what is effectively a domestic dispute.
They say because that's just
Ideology.
the right thing to do.
Ideology. So Germans are going to stop. Germans are going to freeze for ideology, for
Yeah.
their leader's ideology.
Yes.
That doesn't even fit them very well because they're not really all about the freedom and democracy.
Right.
The Germans, the French, the Brits, they all, destroyed Libya. They destroyed Syria. They destroyed Iraq. They all supported that. There's no freedom and democracy there. They claimed it was freedom and democracy, but they were wrecking countries. So they don't care about countries being wrecked. They have a long past record of showing they don't give a shit about countries being wrecked. So why would you believe that they care about Ukraine being wrecked? In fact, they're facilitating the wrecking of Ukraine by prolonging the war. Why would they just not allow Russia to sort out the problem in Ukraine and things go back to a status quo? Germans can have gas, Russian gas, and everything's fine. There's no worries about this winter. Again, when you see that happening, you have to come up with a different explanation that actually fits, because the explanations that they give do not fit with what they're doing. You have to have a more rational, sane explanation as to why they're doing. So
they're going to freeze them this winter to start getting them used to it and to start reducing their population.
I don't know. If that's the end result, in 5 years' time, if you look back and that has been the result, how do you say, was it a mistake or was it intended? How stupid are they? Were they that feckless where they couldn't see that stopping the flow of Russian gas would lead to energy reductions there for freezing Germans and also food production problems and people starving and people dying? They couldn't see that? I mean, you know what I mean?
Right. I know.
If I stop going to the supermarket, and if I stop eating and then I die,
can I not track it back to my stopping eating?
am I that stupid?
No, I think
that I didn't know.
Yeah. No, it can't be, because that's why people are protesting, and they're able to connect these issues even without, greatly informing themselves. They can see 2 + 2 = 4. So obviously, government leaders, elites in general, know what they're doing. Although the reason, like we've had to speculate as to the reason they believe they're doing so. It just seems nuts to me. Like, why wouldn't Germany instead go, okay, we agree with the models, thanks you, Klaus, and your friends. This is where it is going. Why not instead mitigate and prepare as best we can for the oncoming effects by dealing with them as they come? I don't see how shutting off, powering down the computer ahead of what is a solar storm that might fry the computer. Why just powering it down ahead of the speculative solar storm?
Put some protection in place, yeah. Because they don't care.
It doesn't make it.
It
makes
maybe their
sense.
models, maybe the Ferguson model type people have convinced them that it's not something that you can prevent or you can manage. There's no point in you putting any protections in place or trying to prepare yourself for it, because it's going to come. The storm is coming, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's much better that we stage manage the effects that the storm will have in advance of the storm coming.
To acclimatize people psychologically.
Look at it this way: if there's a tornado or a hurricane going to barrel through Florida, right, and you know that it's like a category category 18, never before seen, right? 5 million mile an hour winds, right?
Right.
And you know it's going to level all the houses, undoubtedly. Best thing to do is level all the houses in advance. Then you win against the hurricane.
See what I mean? It doesn't make sense right there.
Well, but the chaos type thing, it's kind of like their problem is the people. Is the kind of stuff they're seeing already is they're scared of people, basically. Yeah. They're scared of the masses and what would happen, because this isn't going to be like I said, it's not going to be all at once. It's going to be progressive. It's going to start, and it's going to cause increasing chaos, increasing public dissent, uprisings, protests and that kind of stuff. And it's better that you have you have a plan and you make it happen. You structure. Of course, there's a whole police state aspect of it, that putting things in place to constrain people's rights to protest and their sense of the right to protest, and that is preparatory for that as well. I mean, that people have talked about for quite a long time now, the burgeoning police states in Western democracies and stuff. What's that for? Well, that's crowd control.
Mm-hmm.
So why have they been doing that for so long, you know? And why are they actually doing this? Here's we're going deep down the rabbit hole here now, Neil.
It doesn't get any deeper, surely. Oh, I saw that headline. EU constructing 8 million euro spy-proof bunker for secret talks. Spy-proof, and it's funded by or in collaboration with NATO, which is beautiful because the EU just comes to the fore truly actually as a front for NATO.
And the narrative again is so that they can discuss secrets without Russian or other eavesdroppers listening in. Chamber could host around only 100 people though. There's a lot more bureaucrats in Brussels, and maybe that's the thing is as this progresses, the people in politics and the political class who think they're part of the in-group and stuff will start to find that actually there's no seats in the bunker for you, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they start going, oh, what?
Yeah.
But I've been a loyal minion for forever.
This is interesting because just last week I was looking into that photo they're showing is, I think it's the new multi-billion euro existing EU Council of Ministers meeting building in Brussels. It's a weird place. It's like from the outside it looks like a cage, right? It's like a lattice of steel and glass and stuff. And you see the faint outline inside of what's an egg shape. It's a giant egg. It's sort of an oval shaped building with many floors. And in the heart of it is the main EU Council meeting building. That's probably a photo of it there. I'm not sure, but I think it is.
But the egg shape.
That thing is brand new and cost billions of euros, right?
Yeah.
And now they're building another one that's even more select.
Yeah.
It's also built on the site of where the Nazis occupied Belgium.
Right.
1940s.
But the egg shape is
Freaky.
appropriate because that's where they're going to be reborn from.
Creepy.
I know you talked about the Roe versus Wade thing has been done and dusted, you think, but no. Marching on Capitol Hill today, and this one is from this one's from the seat of freedom and democracy, California. Let's have a look at what the women have to say in California. That's a brass band. Dude, he's a woman.
What they got. Furious women is what they got. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't submit. We won't submit. We will not take their fascist shit. We will not take their fascist shit. We will not take your fascist shit. Abortion is a human right. Right the fuck now.
Right,
Right the fuck now. Right the fuck now. Right the fuck now.
Right the fuck now.
Up on the sidewalks and into the street. Get up on the sidewalk and into the street. Revolutionaries.
Woohoo!
The blood is on the hands of the Supreme Court.
I will aid and abet abortion. Human rights. Abortion is human rights.
Nothing is going to change in California.
Well, that's it's not a lot of people, I think, but it's going on across the U.S. Like I said today, apparently they're in Washington D.C. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, poor people. I mean, they want to protest about something, and the current thing is what they protest about. I mean, I know you talked about it a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't here, but there's I think maybe I'm not sure if you put this up, but it was just a comparison between the US and the EU in terms of rights to abortion, and Roe versus Wade didn't really, well, it basically restructured abortion rights in America to be in line with most of Europe, and in fact in some places, depending on the state, there's still much more liberal rights to abortion than there are in Europe. So, are we third world country? Like, since we're in Europe, are we third world countries? Like, I mean, are we? Yeah.
It's off. they're protesting against the phantasm they have in their head of where it will go if one brick is pulled out of the wall or whatever
This is
analogy
an
is. Their
erosion.
fear is that the US map will turn black like Poland and Finland,
Right.
where they have the most restrictive abortion
Right.
laws in Europe. Their fear is that now that Roe versus Wade is pulled away, oh shit, here it comes. It's the floodgates. But it's totally unfounded. They respond to that map and say, yeah, but that was pre-Roe versus Wade. So 13 states have laws on the books that were waiting for Roe versus Wade to be lifted to become more liberal. So those 13 states, I won't name them, but I mentioned them on the show, will become yellow.
Like most of Europe.
Like most of Europe. I don't think they'll... Texas has the most extreme in the US, and that remains the case.
Yeah, 1 to 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Isn't 10 weeks long enough? Like, I mean, you do a pregnancy test after 4 or 5 weeks, and then you've got 4 weeks to kind of like figure out whether you want an abortion or not, and then you go ahead and get one.
Well, a lot of people can, yeah.
Why would you
it
want
should
to
be
go-
long enough because there's one cycle
What are you doing?
that's due, but they say sometimes, often they don't know until later than that.
Yeah, okay, a bit later, but in very rare cases. But I think most women who are pregnant, like after, like
Missing one
30
cycle,
weeks
they do a
is
test.
what 7. It's 7 months. That's 7.5 months is 30 weeks. So like by 5 or 6 months, I'm sure you know you're pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Even
I
before
think.
that, right? 4 or 5 months. Why would you want to go? Why would you go through the process of like? Because it's kind of difficult being pregnant, I suppose. I don't know, but I'm assuming it's kind of difficult being pregnant, right? It's not.
You have no right to talk about this show.
Shut the hell up. No, but so wouldn't you want to, like, if you're gonna have an abortion, have it sooner rather than later?
ASAP, yeah. I know.
And if you have
The whole thing
how does
is-
it change? You know what I mean? Where you go, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm gonna have a baby. So at 6 months you're saying, yeah, I'm pregnant. Look, I've got a bump and everything, and I'm gonna have a baby. And then a month later you say, nah, I don't want it anymore. Who does that?
I know. Sick people.
Right.
Sorry. You can't say, hey, oh, you say that of all women. No. If you're a woman and you're doing that, you're pretty twisted. I mean, it's decided at that point. You're pregnant. You know you're pregnant. You're visibly pregnant. Do it earlier if you're going to have to. Anyway, it's what they're protesting is they're protesting. It's ideology. Obviously, it's nothing to do with the actual medical issues, or even choice. Say you choose and you've got 10 weeks or 20 weeks. Hell, okay, come in line with Europe. You've got 20 weeks to decide. Okay,
That's 5 months.
that's enough. You don't need any more. That's
Right. Why would you protest about?
So what they're protesting about, they're afraid that the US will flip all black in that map.
But there's no reason to think that.
No, but again, they have.
But they
the
want to protest about
ideology has
something.
infected them to remember in their head Trump was literally Hitler,
Right.
and that's so far from reality. So it follows with every other issue.
All right, moving over a bit more further east. Putin had a few choice words for Western countries this week. I'm sure you were heartened, were you?
Oh yeah,
So, headline: Putin says Russia just getting started in Ukraine. But aren't they? Didn't they lose already? Aren't they? They lost so many times that surely it's completely lost now. You know.
this is.
What do you
just-
mean, just getting started?
This is bluster from a man who's losing.
Okay, bluster from. So if you
Yeah.
scroll down, President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that Russia had barely got started in Ukraine and dared the West to try to defeat it on the battlefield. He said, "Today we hear they want to defeat us on the battlefield. What can you say? Let them try. And we have heard many times that the West wants to fight us to the last Ukrainian. This is a tragedy for the Ukrainian people, but it seems that everything is heading towards this." Yep. And then
Did you see
scroll
the-
down a little bit more. Everyone should know that by and large, we haven't started anything yet in earnest. At the same time, we don't reject peace talks. But those who reject them should know that the further it goes, the harder it will be for them to negotiate with us. Yeah. Fight and talk from Vlad the Impaler, and also just more recently the stuff in Latvia, it was in the news a couple of weeks ago that the Latvians had shut off rail access through their country.
Lithuania, no.
Sorry, Lithuania. Through their country to Kaliningrad, which is the Russian enclave in the Baltic states there. And the Russians at the time said, yeah, this is very bad. You better not do this, or we'll
physically
sort it out.
Yeah.
And then this is from just yesterday, actually. Apparently they said again, if the situation will not return to normal, so that suggests that you haven't heard much about it, but it seems that the situation hasn't been normalised again, and the Lithuanians are still messing around, obviously at the behest of the EU and further on at the behest of NATO, and back up the line to Washington DC. This is a Washington DC and EU bureaucrats' little game that they're playing to try and piss off Russia and provoke Russia. And they've said again, the Russians have said again, if the situation does not return to normal in the coming days, we'll take harsh measures against Lithuania and the European Union. So that's obviously Russia's just spitballing. They don't mean any of that, and nobody can take anything they say seriously because, whatever, they just talk, and they're all talking, no action, right? They don't do what they say. So yeah, just try it, Vlad, and fuck around and find out, and. And
Joe is, of course, being sarcastic.
That's what's
Russia can do anything it wants at this point.
Well, we'll see.
It can take Berlin.
We'll see. I don't know. But it's a dangerous game.
It can take London. Come on, all the way up the Atlantic. There is nothing stopping them.
Yeah.
There is no army to stop them.
Yeah. I'd say, so it is going to... This
the
situation...
US will flee.
Yeah.
Soldiers. They won't fight.
But you see, you put it back in the context of the grand plan, right, that we talked about earlier on.
Mm-hmm. Is Putin in on the grand plan?
He probably knows. He's not in on it. He's not a party to it. He doesn't subscribe to it, but he probably is aware that he's certainly aware of what these people believe.
Do you think his actions in Ukraine have that in mind? That he's trying to ultimately sabotage the whole, upend the whole thing?
More like protect himself, protect Russia. And if the West wants to do this, go through this destructive process, this creative destructive process, then fair enough, but we're going to protect ourselves from the fallout from it.
Here's a flaw in the plan, right? And so you're going ahead with your plan. You're going to end up with the West decimated. And Russia, less so. Let's say they also know catastrophe is coming, but they've taken active measures to maintain coherence and maintain life. Russia wins. Post-collapse.
No, post-collapse, everybody...
They have more. The people.
Well, post-collapse, everybody gets on pretty well, right? It's like none of this is personal, right? All the stuff that the public are encouraged to think that that there's real animosity between global leaders, but there's not. And that's not because they're nice people necessarily. It's just that that's not important. They're not buddies anyway. So there's no love lost, if you know what I mean, to begin with. And it's all about business. Business is, money talks. And business is what it's all about at the end of the day. So some kind of post-collapse situation, even if Russia and China, manage to protect themselves, which is kind of unlikely. I mean, maybe to some extent, but nobody's going to be protected against a global economic foobar. Right, everybody's going to have problems. But post collapse, let's say, and when this is their vision, right? When things re-emerge, well, everybody's going to have to do business with each other. There's going to have to be people and leaders in different parts of the world to do business. Like if Russia and China say they protect themselves in their best case scenario, they protect themselves. The West collapses, and Russia and China remain relatively unscathed, and they are now in a commanding position. They're still going to need people in positions of power and people in Europe and in America to do business with. Unless you're suggesting that the Chinese are just going to export half the population over to Europe and America and to take possession of the homes. Russia doesn't have the population to do that. Russia needs all its own population and more. China has a bit of an excess, but I don't think they're going to need people, and they're going to need structure and political structure and governmental structure and business structure and people to run it in those countries when the dust settles. And when they do, all previous grievances are or put aside. They all shake hands and say, yeah, well, I mean, you know, it wasn't personal, like, you know.
That sounds like normally
it wasn't personal. It's not personal.
Well, there's something that backs that up. You explained it to me about Ukraine last week. So let's show people a headline first. Not a headline. Let's show a map. This is a slide that was photographed and published online. This is a slide from a meeting that took place in Switzerland last week. Hosted by the EU, but it was a bit more than just European Union countries present. It was basically about rebuilding Ukraine. At first I laughed at it because I was like, what are these people thinking, rebuilding Ukraine? It's Russia. Look at it. That's the east of Ukraine on the map there behind the guy, and the south. And they've allocated European countries and Americas in there to the US's around Kharkiv region, places where they expect...
Is that Ireland up in...
Ireland is given a place in the western Ukraine where they accumulated, all told, they estimate it's going to be costing $750 billion of investment to rebuild Ukraine. And these countries are going to be like given a territory to co-manage with locals, I guess, post-war, when the dust has settled. And I laughed. I thought, these people are fantasizing. But then I was talking to you, and you made me think about it in a way I hadn't before, which is, hang on a second. If you look at the details, what's actually happening? There's been videos on Russian Telegram channels. Construction companies are already out and at work in Mariupol, building large factories, apartment complexes, rebuilding the city and elsewhere. And well, I don't know. Do you have any evidence for it? You are suggesting that this rebuilding plan in Europe isn't a pie in the sky thing. It's actually about linking up with Russian companies behind the sanctions wall to invest
which is good
in
for
rebuilding Ukraine right now.
Of course, Russia doesn't like sanctions. You know, it doesn't like. Well, put it this way: look at all the well, I don't have a list right now, but look at. I mean, it's easily found. Look at all the companies that have supposedly divested from Russia.
Yeah,
some of them haven't, but the companies that have divested from Russia under sanctions and the problems Russia has. There's plenty of articles detailing the problems Russia is having with sourcing parts and all that kind of stuff, and having to look elsewhere for parts and all that kind of stuff. And there's some things that they really can't replace, and they have to just do without. I mean, there's for Nord Stream, they supposedly turned off Nord Stream 1 because there's, I can't remember what part, but there's a part, basically a turbine. A turbine.
It's being held up in Canada,
right? Because it goes there for refurbishment,
calibration, or repairs.
But that's one small example of the interlink between companies and economies in the world, and especially industrial economies that produce industrial parts, and Russia's part of that. And Russia relies, like every other country, relies on other countries in the West and elsewhere, but in the West and in America for parts. Think about the Americans not being able to go to the space station anymore, not being able to launch rockets anymore. NASA can't launch rockets anymore because to the space station, at least, without Russian, because it's Russian rockets, Russian production, right? So there's a serious, that's globalization, right? An interlinking of, it's been going on for quite a while, interlinking of countries via economic ties and you know, the different things they produce that each country uses. Like, so why would any one country produce absolutely everything when they can buy it from? Well, they probably can't produce everything. No. They need to buy it from other places. The same is true of Donbass. If you're going to reconstruct Donbass, the most effective and efficient reconstruction of any parts of Ukraine involves, and it's across the board. It's from building to industrial plants, to roadworks, to plumbing, to, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it's not something that Russia. Maybe it could, to some extent, do it by itself, but it would be a lot harder. So, again, this gets back to the idea that it's not personal and that business is business. You don't take any of this stuff personally. You and me might take it personally. People on either side of the debate about Ukraine take it personally, and they project that personal feeling onto
my side,
onto the elites, thinking that they too, like Boris Johnson really hates Vladimir Putin, or Biden really hates Vladimir Putin, or they really hate Xi Jinping or something like that. But it's nonsense. That's not how those people operate. They don't see the world in that way. It's not personal to them. And again, it doesn't mean that they're nice people necessarily. It means that they're just very pragmatic people, and they have to be pragmatic people.
I'm reading here about this conference. 1,000 people attended. The conference had been planned before Russia's invasion, with the original agenda to focus on Kiev's progress on the path toward governmental reform. Well, that may not mean anything. Maybe now it's actually been retooled to the reconstruction of Ukraine. So that would be something to dig into. Is there any evidence of Western companies that are ostensibly not doing business with Russia because of the sanctions, because of the war, but in actuality, in real time, right now, they are actually contributing to the nuts and bolts rebuilding of southeastern Ukraine as the Russian wave goes through Ukraine? Behind it, they're already
at work,
cooperating to rebuild Ukraine.
Absolutely, for sure, and it makes sense both to Russian to Western companies. It's a win-win situation. Right, there is still some win-win situations on it when it comes down to practical business deals and stuff. That's how it's all aimed to be a win-win, right? And in many cases it can be. You know, where you cooperate. There is some cooperation still going on at the practical on the ground level. There has to be cooperation going on, but it makes sense for Western companies to be involved in eastern Ukraine, in the rebuilding of eastern Ukraine, because it gives Western companies, and by extension Western governments, a foothold in the territory that Russia has supposedly conquered. Do you want to just leave it all to Russia, or do you want to put your companies in there? Is it not part of our? Is the whole thing that we didn't want Russia to get Donbass, that Donbass should go back to Ukraine? Well, if we can't get that completely, the next best thing, at the very least, would be that some major Western companies would be directly involved in that part of Ukraine, because it gives us a future bridgehead, right? I mean, what if we want to get some CIA guys in there? They can go in there as or German intelligence guys. They want to go there. They go as Siemens employees. We're Siemens employees. We're going to visit the factory that Siemens is helping to build in Donbass. Awesome. Or do we just shut ourselves out completely?
The ideological side of my brain says, no way. No way. They would never. But the rational side goes, hang on a second.
That's where it is.
Remember Lafarge helping ISIS directly to produce cement in Syria to build its fucking bunkers?
It's not personal, man. It's just business.
It's disaster capitalism at the next. It's where it would logically go to next.
Yep.
Like they're literally sending the shells to blow up the building and the concrete pillars to rebuild it.
Yeah.
The day after.
I like money. Do you like money? We should hang out.
Bloody hell.
Is that a line from Idiocracy? I don't know what that line's from. Anyway, yeah, and
Bojo, we've mentioned him twice.
Who cares?
Bloody hell. What the hell? Why? I mean, he won a landslide election officially. And then they just get rid of him.
He's a good example of what we're talking about. He has no ideology. Think he's a conservative? Bojo isn't a conservative. He's not a Labour. He's not a lefty. He's not nothing, right? He doesn't have an ideology. He doesn't have an ideology that he tries to impose on the country.
Yeah.
He basically is just an open book in a certain sense, and will absorb any ideology that will help him to get into a position of power, or to get him what he wants, basically. Which is true for many people. I mean, truth be told, most politicians are like that.
So why get rid of him? Because if that's true, then it's also true that he's an open book for whatever special interests want to use him. What, he was blocking their way?
No, I don't think he was gotten rid of. I think it's something that happens in politics a lot, is that, especially when you get to a point where there's a lot of corruption in a country, in the political sphere, where that kind of corruption is kind of endemic, and it's spread from the top down, and there's a sense of untouchableness about them, and that was actually Bolsonaro said that in that talk he gave with Tucker Carlson, where he said that during the COVID pandemic, that a lot of people in Western countries in particular, but around the world, got a taste of
Tyranny.
a taste of unaccountability, that they could do whatever they want with impunity. And that, of course, there's been growing corruption in many countries over the past number of years. It's coming to a head now, but COVID just made it worse. The lockdowns just made it worse, and it's coming out. It has come out. And basically, Bojo was booted because he was a sacrificial lamb. Basically, he was a scapegoat because, well, he's the leader of the party and therefore the prime minister. And there's a bunch of these scandals that are coming out that are indicative of these politicians feeling that they could do whatever they want and get away with it. And how are we going to appease the population who aren't happy about this? Well, somebody's head has to roll, right? So Bojo's head will roll. He's the obvious one. He's buck stops with him, quote unquote. So just get rid of him, and then people kind of breathe a sigh of relief, feel that there's checks and balances, and then have a new person come in. It's great. It's a refresher,
Yeah.
People are getting a bit antsy, maybe a bit protesty, a bit insurrection-y, and they feel that there's no accountability, and that's why we need to impose our will, the people, on the politicians. Well, before you do that, what if we chop this guy's head off? Will that make you feel better?
Symbolically.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay, his head will roll, and then here's a new person.
And then everyone feels better. And look,
here's
there's going to be a
person.
new government.
I wonder what they're going to do.
But then on the eve of him departing and people, those who supported it cheering it, this happens. Like, just completely underscoring the fact that 10 Downing Street is not the government.
Yeah.
BBC headline the day before Boris resigned, quote, was kicked out. He's not actually kicked out yet. He's hanging on for a few months. But yeah. Headline, China. MI5 and FBI heads warn of immense threat. I mean, that's the government right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, or that's one expression of the so-called deep state. It's continuity. It's the Transatlantic Alliance, the Grand Old Alliance. It's same as before. Nothing changes here.
What were they actually saying?
Scroll down a bit. They decided to agree that China was evil.
Yeah. Let's all agree that China's evil.
It's the FBI director and the head of MI5 warning that the biggest long-term threat to our British American economic and national security is China, and that they've interfered in our politics, including recent elections. So that's the spiel they pulled with Russia 6 years ago, now being applied to China.
So them Chinese, eh?
Them Chinese, which is, there's no evidence for any of that. But obviously what they're worried about is China's... well, I don't know. You explain to me, are they worried about China's supplanting their position as hegemon when they have this grand plan and everyone's going to go foobar anyway?
If I'm an ice cream seller, and the only ice cream seller on the block, and I've got a small van, and then one day another guy comes in and he's got better Italian ice cream. Right, I was just selling local ice cream, and he's got Italian ice cream. He's got a bigger van. Is he not a threat to me?
He is.
There you go.
But yeah, okay.
He's spying on me as well. Keeps looking at me.
And he's the appropriate metaphor. He's stealing my ice cream tech.
He's stealing my tech. Yeah, he's stealing my recipes.
About them Chinese, more lockdowns in China. Let's look at this one. Shanghai, I think, is open again. That was an intense, 6-week lockdown. This one, they say, it's just for a week. Headline, The Guardian, China imposes COVID lockdown in Xi'an after handful of cases. Subheadline, Zero COVID strategy. Why? Shuts down North Central city of 13 million people following 18 reported cases of Omicron.
Yeah, a highly transmissible Omicron subvariant that gives people the sniffles has sent parts of the ancient Chinese city of Xi'an of 13 million people into a 7-day lockdown. It's Chinese flu, man.
Why? They know it's a cold.
Yeah.
But
that's the Chinese mind. That's why you need to fear the Chi-Coms. They're coming for you. That's their totalitarian mindset, and that the Chinese people just follow along blindly with that. You don't see any protests in China, do you? Because they're completely
Oh, we don't hear about them.
They're completely dominated by the Chinese dictatorship. And they're coming for you, Neil.
That's what Tucker Carlson rants about. But
yes, the Chinese are after you.
I'm like, are they? How? Explain how they're after me. I'm not justifying that. That looks extreme, and the only the best available explanation is what Bolsonaro suggests. COVID just gave people a taste for tyranny. I can't see another explanation for that. I'm not Chinese. I'm not in China. I don't know why they would do that, except just for control's sake, right? Or maybe in terms of a grand plan, they also have an eye to coming issues, and they want to make sure they have people well under control.
Well, just put it in
either way.
Let me put it in context.
Yeah,
I know it's a lot of people, but in terms of, I suppose one thing people have a hard time getting their head around is the size of China in terms of the population. Almost 1.5 billion people. 13 million is, what is that? 0.01%.
Something small.
So equivalent would be in, say, a town in France, a town of 6,000 people was put into a 1-week lockdown because of an outbreak of Omicron. Would that make news?
Probably, because it would be such an outlier.
Right. So it'd be a weird thing where they're doing spottily here.
It's the reason they give for it. Omicron, 18 cases.
Right.
And a 7-day lockdown to stop the transmissibility of a airborne respiratory virus, which we know scientifically is just about impossible to stop with lockdowns.
Right.
We've seen all the Johns Hopkins University who started that whole thing in the West and now publishing their meta study after all these years of lockdowns, and they're saying they didn't do shit to stop the virus.
Right.
So why? What I'm saying is it dislocates the scientific reason, the ostensible pandemic reason, from the actual reason why they did that, The thing is, there's no alternative that we hear of. Never mind alternative media in China that could, offer counters. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, there's no attempt at official levels in China
to explain it,
to give a plausible reason for it.
Justify it, yeah.
So maybe the Western fear of, Jesus, Chinese people just accept whatever they're told has some validity to it. Where I don't go and make the leap, though, that Tucker Carlson does, and he's with MI5 and FBI on this, because of what they can do to one city, that's why they represent, quote, an immense threat to our way of life. I don't see the leap between the two, unless they're suggesting vaguely that because China does X, everyone else starts to mimic it. That is, of course, a meta argument for why COVID lockdowns happened at all in the first place in the West. Well, look, China did it, so we'll do it too. But Chinese government didn't order.
No,
Western
that was a bullshit narrative. They did it because they wanted to. In the West, they did it because they wanted to experiment with locking entire populations in their homes to see how it would go. It's not complicated. Like when you're in positions of power and your mandate effectively is to control the population. When an opportunity like that comes along to control the population in a very specific and extreme way, then you're going to take it, right? We've talked about that before. It was a boon for behavioral scientists as well. They got on board and just used all the tools they've been developing over many decades to apply it to the entire population. And they admitted themselves that they went too far and effectively used terror to control the population with very negative impact on the people's psychological health, basically. So, but I don't know. Nobody understands the Chinese, Neil. I'll have to get somebody on the show here and interview them. Somebody who understands the Chinese.
Yeah.
Or China.
But it would also have to be somebody who understands that COVID didn't merit this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You see?
Again, though,
because the ones I know who are kind of China hands, analyze China very well when it comes to many other political and geopolitical international issues, are all like, that's the thing, that's the proper thing to do for COVID. They don't question it at all. So I don't know of anyone who can bridge the two issues.
Well, the only thing that stands out to me is the fact that COVID was a very different was perceived in a very different way in China than it was in the rest of the world. Or the
initially.
narrative. Huh?
Initially.
No, but ongoing.
Right.
It has a lasting legacy, because the way the Chinese government understood it very early on was this was a biological weapon attack on the Chinese, potentially a biological weapon attack on the Chinese by the West.
And did they tell their population that as such?
No. It may have spread, but who knows? But that left an enduring kind of suspicion and you could even say a certain paranoia, but justified maybe amongst the Chinese government that this could continue. And then you put up an article like you said an article like you cited there, where the head of the FBI and the MI5 are saying that China is an immense threat. So they read that and they realize that they don't need to read that article to realize that that's the way the West perceives them, especially the UK and the Americans. And what are they willing to do? Well, a couple of years ago, they dropped a genetically modified, or a lab-created virus, or a lab-modified virus on our doorstep. Are they going to do it again? Is that part of a process, or is that part of a series of events? So the Chinese government may feel that they need to take this much more seriously, and for different reasons, not from a epidemiological point of view in a certain sense, but rather from a biowarfare, from a geopolitical point of view. So that influences their and maybe explains why they have an ongoing issue, or they're continuing the whole lockdowns and isolation and stuff when the rest of the world has pretty much moved on from it. And that brings up that guy, what's his name, Sachs? Jeffrey Sachs?
Jeffrey Sachs.
Who is Jeffrey Sachs?
Jeffrey Sachs was one of the top Harvard people that was sent to Russia after the fall of the USSR in the early 90s. Clinton's team of advisors who were going to help Russia transition from Soviet system central planned economy to a free market economy. He's since moved on to become I think he was an advisor to Clinton through the 90s. Nowadays, he's like advisor to the UN, a top person in the CFR, I think, the Council of Foreign Relations, all around head honcho Washington think tank industry, right? Mm-hmm. But he's always had twice this week, there have been 2 interviews he gave that truthified a couple of issues. One of them was Russia and the invasion of Ukraine. He squarely blamed NATO for that. And the other one was where he articulated for the first time probably, so this is no longer a conspiracy theory, you YouTube fact checkers, or if it is, then you need to censor Jeffrey Sachs, because he articulated what we were hinting at right from the outset of this, that this thing is obviously man-made and it came from an American lab and was dropped in Wuhan.
Just dig up those 2. We'll hear it from the horse's mouth. We played this last week, I think, the first one, but we'll play it again anyway, just to underline the point.
Yeah.
Who's that guy who posted that? Looper.
Some nutter, some conspiracy theorist.
I think that our foreign policy strategy, both towards China and towards Russia, has been provocative and divisive for a number of years. This didn't just start now. There was already the U.S. trade wars on China, and then the technology wars, the financial sanctions, and all the rest. We've divided the world, and now we're paying a strong, heavy cost for that. There should have been negotiation in 2021 when Putin said NATO should not expand to Ukraine and Georgia. I would have been the first one to say absolutely correct. Why do something so provocative, something akin to the Crimean War back in 1853? We shouldn't be having a Black Sea confrontation. So we should have been prudent. Putin said last year, negotiate over the non-enlargement of NATO. Biden said, absolutely not. That's off the table. We are going to expand. We're committed to having NATO not only in Ukraine, but all the way across to the eastern edge of the Black Sea in Georgia. This is a huge expansion of NATO. NATO was a defensive alliance of Western Europe against the Soviet Union, a defensive alliance against a country that doesn't exist. And yet we said it will continue to expand all the way to the eastern edge of the Black Sea. And Russia kept saying no for 30 years. I was there at the beginning when this discussion started. Russia was saying, don't do that. Gorbachev was saying, don't do that. Hans-Dietrich Genscher, the German foreign minister
Jeffrey,
in 1990, said, don't worry, we won't move 1 inch.
1 inch. You see the CNN talking heads about to explode there.
Yeah, trying to butt in all the time. And just throw up the other one, just for reference, it's the...
Oh, one last thing. I should say that where he's speaking here on COVID, he was the chair of the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, part of whose remit was to investigate the origins of COVID-19.
This is one.
Right.
Now we have a war that could have been avoided. It would have been avoided if the United States had not been so insistent on pushing NATO eastward and eastward.
That's the same one. Sorry. Anyway, here there was another one. We can cancel that. There was another one where he basically said, yeah, COVID was looked like it came out of a US lab. We'll put it in the link in the show description. Yeah. So, but you can throw shade all you want, Neil, at China and saying that they're, they're exaggerating. They're just taking this whole COVID thing too far. But you haven't heard about this, obviously.
Daily Beast. This new Ninja COVID variant is the most dangerous one yet.
Ninja. You haven't heard about the Ninja variant.
It's just like COVID with slanty eyes or something.
Neil, yes, it is actually. But that's not the point. The point is...
It's still evolving.
The band's going to make it. The COVID band is going to make it.
It still may actually kill hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, after all has been said and done, COVID was not nothing.
No.
What we were railing about for 2 years was the mismatch of the measures to the something.
Mm-hmm.
So China, like everyone else, is dealing with the something that is causing immune complications, that is possibly recombining, causing cross-infections, causing the reappearance of viral infections, cryptic pneumonia and so on in people. And that's before any vaccines were tried to introduce to fix the problem. COVID itself, the actual SARS-CoV-2 virus, was quite a wrecking ball on the kind of normal seasonal equilibrium of seasonal respiratory viruses that come and go. Because it was a coronavirus that was souped up. Coronaviruses come and go every winter. They contribute to the quote unquote the flu every winter. So this one did something.
Yes.
But that article suggests, oh wait, hang on a second, there's more to come. Okay, right. That's where to rationalize why the Chinese are doing these preemptive lockdowns still now, the only way I can rationalize it on the face of it is, okay, so the Chinese are thinking they've had a good look at this virus, they've studied it closely like everyone else these last few years, but they're still worried that there could be worse to come from it, even though its epidemiological trajectory so far has for every new variant to be weaker than the last in terms of case fatality ratio and actual deaths.
Yeah, well, this...
What it can maybe, I mean, it's not, yeah, we're definitely not out of the woods in the sense that it can still recombine, but by the time you're talking about a different pandemic at that point.
Yeah.
However, maybe that's why Biden is so goddamn certain, with the mouthpiece in his ear is so certain that there's a second pandemic coming. Mark my words. He said it 3 times in the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's not coming out of COVID, though, because, I mean, just throw one up, Scotty. This is from... It's a preprint, but it's from EPI and World Health Organization collaborating Center for Disease, Cornell, Qatar. I think I've talked about this previously, but anyway, it basically says that it's a fairly big study that says that the effectiveness of primary infection against severe, critical or fatal COVID reinfection was 97.3%, irrespective of variant of primary infection or reinfection. So basically, people who have had COVID of any description, of any variant, your immune response, your natural immune response, not vaccine-induced, natural immune response is 97.3% effective up to 14, not up to, but at 14 months. So at least 14 months afterwards, you still have a 97.3%, take that for what it's worth, but basically, you're basically fully immune to any variant of COVID. And of course, the reason any variant of COVID is included is because as each variant appears, i.e. it's a mutation of the previous one, it gets less and less severe. So you're down to like just a nothing burger, basically. So anytime anybody who's had COVID of any description over the past 2 years, you pretty much don't need any boosters, you don't need any vaccines. You're protected as long as your immune system is in half good shape, which is the vast majority of people. But that has been the case since day one. And also, if you put that together with the fact that people who got COVID, who got infected at any point, the vast majority were not going to have any kind of severe illness, means that the whole thing was a farce. And I hope YouTube doesn't ban us for that, but whatever.
Disclaimer: we are not medical doctors. We're
citing
do not give advice.
We're citing here a study conducted effectively by the World Health Organization. So there you go. You can look it up. We'll put it in the description, and anybody on YouTube who has any problem with it can read the paper. It'll be there for you to look at just before you actually give us a strike for this. So there you go. What else have we got?
Just, run-of-the-mill stuff. More outrageous corruption from the Bidens. Some 4 million barrels from the strategic reserves that were released by the U.S. government because of a special executive order by Joseph Biden was
sent to Europe,
sold to a Chinese company that's
Chinese,
connected to Hunter Biden's business interests in China. I mean, that's just, your run-of-the-mill corruption. Nothing's personal, as you say. It's all business.
Biden wants to get rid of fossil fuels, right?
Right, so he'd sell them to China, and he may as well get rich in the process.
Yeah, and that's
10% for the big guy.
That's not just stopping the extraction of fossil fuels or the production of fossil fuels. The stuff you have in your reserves, you got to get rid of them too.
Yeah, dump it all.
Don't be burning them here. Burn them in China. That'll stop global warming.
Dump it all overboard.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's about all I got this week.
That's all you got? Good. Well, that's enough because it's almost 2 hours.
Excellent.
And people are probably falling asleep. So, yeah. We'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching, reading, snoozing, commenting, especially commenting. We like your comments. And don't forget to smash all the buttons because that's really important. For some reason that I don't fully understand, but do it anyway. And we'll be back next week with another show. Hope you enjoyed it. Until then, have a good week. See you later.
See you later. Bye, everyone.
Can't stop the signal now.